Turn our attention now to the government sport, which seems to involve spying on people who criticise them. Well, they must have a very busy time of it, because there are an awful lot of us. We've just been talking, haven't we, about lockdown and reports into, why people like me were right to criticise lockdown. Yeah, I may not have been as early as everybody, but we all come to this in our own good time, do we not, when we realise the actual facts. But over the weekend, it's emerged that the government had yet another secret unit which was curbing critics of lockdown, spying on them. Mark Johnson is from Big Brother Watch. He's their advocacy manager, and he joins us now. Good morning to you, Mark.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. It is extraordinary. Yet again, we found out more about how the government was, they didn't just want to sort of, to debate people, like me and like, your organisation and others who were saying you shouldn't be curbing our ability to actually live freely, but also even to speak freely, to criticise the government. But they were actually trying to silence people, weren't they?
They were, and it's incredibly disturbing for our democracy more widely. I mean, I think the British public have an expectation that, when it comes to, the disinformation campaigns of hostile foreign states, perhaps the government should be playing a role there. But what we found in our investigation, which was, led into this reporting at the weekend, was that the counter-disinformation unit, this unit that the government run, was not necessarily looking at hostile foreign state disinformation. It was looking at criticism of government policy and dissent. And that has huge ramifications for freedom of speech in the UK. We're talking about, journalists, academics, politicians, all sorts of very mainstream characters being put in these disinformation reports for doing nothing more than criticising the government. And, frankly, that really undermines our democracy. We should be very worried.
In another report that you've done, I was one of the journalists who they monitored, and I remember, working with freedom of speech requests and getting all the data back. And goodness me, it took about 6 months to get proper responses. You had to try again and again and again. And then discovering, the most sort of even just obviously jokes on Twitter were being monitored, were being flagged. I'm currently working through with one company who were being paid by the government to monitor my tweets, and then to actually flag up to the government which ones they thought they should call on Twitter to ban. I mean, just extraordinary stuff. And I'm a journalist; it's my job to do this. But they were also doing it, you say, to scientists, people like Professor Carl Hennigan, we have on the show regularly. He's a professor of evidence-based medicine at Oxford University, and the government wanted to shut him down. That said, there is a government minister right now in office serving under Rishi Sunak, Neil O'Brien, whose job it was. He set up a website under the behest of Matt Hancock or Michael Gove, to basically rubbish people like Hennigan and Sunetra Gupta and people like me. The fact that these people are allowed anywhere near government or polite society, and they're not completely and utterly exposed as the charlatans they are, I find extraordinary. We've got another issue here, though, because we saw what happened particularly with Justin Trudeau as Canadian Prime Minister with the truckers and their dispute over having to have vaccine passports in Canada. Didn't make a lot of the mainstream media. A huge, big issue where people who donated money, they had their money basically seized at one point, where they were not able to donate. People had their bank accounts frozen if their business had donated $20 to these truckers. So we now know the importance of being in control of your money. Now, this has raised concerns about central bank digital currencies. Now, there was a deadline. It was going to be this Wednesday, but now it's been extended to the end of the month. The Treasury's got a consultation on whether we have a British central bank digital currency. Explain what that is and explain why you at Big Brother Watch are concerned about it.
Well, you've set out the context quite nicely, which is that there has been an increase in kind of financial censorship over the last kind of decade or so, and that's something we have to be very wary of. A central bank digital currency is basically a new form of digital currency, but unlike a kind of cryptocurrency like, say, Bitcoin, this would be state-issued, would be run by the state and would be entirely centralised through the Bank of England. And our concerns, I suppose, are that this would allow for greater kind of monitoring of people's financial transactions, more so than ever before. But also, you kind of hit the nail on the head there, which is that this kind of currency could be controlled by the government in a way that also had never been seen before. So, for example, the government could say that there are certain things that you can and can't pay for. They could actually kind of limit your spending in certain ways.
And this would be your money that you've earned. This isn't, say, benefits being given, saying we can only spend this on fresh vegetables, you can't spend it on booze. A lot of us might not have an issue with that. But this is your money that you've earned, and the government, because they're able to control the digital currency, you're just physically not able to pay for anything that you want to buy because the government says you can't.
Exactly. And I must stress this is a hypothetical risk. The government will say, oh, no, of course, that's not what we intend to do by any means. But of course, this is something we have to guard against, because in this context of financial censorship, the Canadian government shutting down protests by freezing, assets and bank accounts, we can't allow that to happen. And so, these words, we're not going to do that. Don't worry, it's fine.
But also, we'd never do it. But they do it in China. They use their social credit system. If you've been critical of the government, you can't buy a train ticket, you can't buy a plane ticket, you can't spend your money on this or that. That's happened there. We've imported rather a lot from China in recent years, and perhaps we want to be wary. But again, no one would have ever thought that the Canadian government would do that. A beacon of democracy. Well, they did it. So what is to stop a government doing it here?
Exactly. And, more than anything else, what the government have not done so far is justified why this is necessary at all. Yeah. What is the purpose of this? Why do we need it? And given the risks to our privacy, given the risk that they might be able to control our finances in an unprecedented way, why do we need this currency at all? There's no evidence base for it. There's no justification.
Mark Johnson for Big Brother Watch, thank you very much indeed. Too late to bring James Heard back in on this. But again, this is the sort of stuff that you see on social media. Oh, for goodness sake, this is just a conspiracy theory. It's not a conspiracy theory. This has been done. This is being used in other countries to control people and control free speech. There is nothing that we hold dear in this country that is not reliant on there being freedom of speech. And yes, that includes during lockdowns your ability to actually speak out against someone controlling what you can and can't do, whether you can hug your family members or not.